Then in terms of just an overview of NWASCO, NWASCO started its operations in the year 2000, though provision for its establishment was done in 1997. And at the moment, we do regulate 11 commercial water supply and sanitation companies throughout the country. And in addition to that, we also do regulate 6 private schemes that include Zambia Sugar, ZESCO, Kalea Small Holdings, and Kafue Sugar for water supply and sanitation service provision. This is just a map of Zambia that shows various water utility companies that are spread throughout the country. Just for unique purposes, only the Copperbelt province that is serviced by 3 water utility companies, that's Molonga, Nkana, and Kafue water supply and sanitation companies. The rest of the provinces are being serviced by 1 utility company, be it Lusaka Water Supply and Sanitation Company, Eastern Water Supply and Sanitation Company, and so forth. Then in terms of the functions for NWASCO, I'll just dwell on one. Like I rightly said, that NWASCO regulates water supply and sanitation companies for service provision. So there are various other functions that NWASCO does other than just regulation of the 11 utility companies that are spread throughout the country. So in the interest of time, I think certain slides, I'll be skipping them. Then in terms of some of the achievements that have been recorded from the time that NWASCO started its operations in the year 2000, we do have a fully commercialized water supply and sanitation sector that is actually well set up. Then we have seen quite a lot of positive progression when it comes to access to water supply and sanitation services, more especially water supply. The sanitation part has continued to lag behind due to some reasons that I'm going to. Then we've also seen an increase in peri-urban access to water supply and sanitation services compared to how the scenario was in the late 80s, the late 90s, and so forth. So what we have seen is that there's a lot of positive progression with regard to access to water supply. Sanitation has actually continued to lag behind, more especially on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management services. With regard to sewerage services, there are some positive trends that various utilities have actually made on the same. Then we have also seen an improvement in hours of supply, water availability, more especially in urban and peri-urban areas. Then one of the success stories is that NWASCO has continued to be very exemplary in terms of providing regulation, and we do have quite a number of countries that have been coming through to actually, learn about regulation. Then in terms of the challenges that the sector is grasped with, one of the main challenges that is there is the high non-revenue water. This is a problem that is actually, obtaining throughout the country, because the sector benchmark for non-revenue water is 25%. But if you look at where we are at national level, we're actually standing at 56%, which is way too much, meaning that the utilities are actually being very, very inefficient, and this adds to their actually high operations and maintenance. There are various reasons as to why we do have that high non-revenue water, because we do have commercial losses as well as physical losses that are actually embedded in the same. So some challenges, I think maybe you've already read them, otherwise I'll go to the next slide. Then the basis of regulation, I'll just speak generally to this slide. From the time that water utility companies were actually established, what had happened was that they were mostly skewed towards water supply and sewerage services. But if you look at the act that provides for their establishment, it's the Water Supply and Sanitation Act of 1997. And if you look at sanitation, the definition of sanitation itself, it does not just limit itself to the provision of off-site sanitation services or sewered sanitation services. It also includes a component of on-site sanitation services. So from the time that these companies started their operations, what has happened is that more especially in urban and peri-urban areas, there's been a lot of improvement with regards to coverage, water supply coverage, and sewerage services. But on the front of on-site sanitation, this has continued to lag behind. And if you look at our population dynamics in the country, you tend to discover that the majority of our people, our citizens actually live in peri-urban areas. They constitute the biggest chunk of the urban population. And if you look at the kind of sanitation facilities that are obtaining in these peri-urban areas, they are mostly focused on on-site sanitation. And when you talk of on-site sanitation here, I'm actually referring to sanitation technologies that include, the ordinary pit latrines, as well as people that use what? Septic tanks. But what had happened over time was that because of the non-regulation of on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management services, what had happened was, say for instance, the 2016-2017 cholera outbreak that we had in Lusaka City, focusing on George compound. The main reason why we did have that outbreak was because of percolation of contaminated groundwater to nearby water sources that unfortunately some people, more especially in George compound, some areas in Kanyama compound still relied on what? Shallow wells as access to drinking water. So because of that, we did have that, that outbreak, cholera outbreak, and we did actually lose almost over 100 people, and we had almost 300 people that got sick as a result of the same. So at the launch of the 2016-2017 sector report, the ministers of water development and sanitation, including the minister of local government, did direct NWASCO to say NWASCO has to develop regulatory mechanisms to ensure that they regulate urban on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management services, because on the front of water supply and sewerage services, there was some progress that was made towards the same. Then this just shows the coverage. More specifically, I'm interested in the national urban sanitation coverage. As at 2021, you can see that we are at 71.5%. So this data is available in the NWASCO urban and peri-urban sector report that you can actually download on the NWASCO website, which is www.nwasco.org.zm. You'll find this report. It includes other indicators that might be of interest to some people here. So even urban sanitation coverage in terms of sewerage, we're only at 71%. The national sanitation coverage is actually far much less than that. Then some gaps in urban on-site sanitation. Why is it that it was very difficult for us to regulate urban on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management? Some of these gaps are being addressed, others have not yet been addressed. So I'll just speak generally to this slide. One of the most prominent gaps is the data with regard to safely managed sanitation services. Remember, under the Sustainable Development Goal, SDG 6.2, talks of safely managed sanitation services. So as we are standing right now, we don't have comprehensive data with regard to safely managed sanitation services. Though utilities with the support of cooperating partners and NWASCO itself have started robust data collection mechanisms to ensure that at least we have some good inventory of the safely managed sanitation facilities. Then no standards for construction of on-site sanitation facilities with regard to, like the pit latrines and sanitation facilities that pertain in public places like, markets. We did not have that kind of specifications with regard to such kind of drawings. Then poorly built on-site facilities leading to groundwater pollution. Remember, I did share with you that one of the reasons why we did have that huge outbreak, cholera outbreak in 2016-2017 was because of percolation of contaminated groundwater from nearby sanitation facilities. So these slides I'll actually share with any of you that are interested, because I'm looking at time. I don't really want to delay people here. Then these are the gaps that have actually continued. So we did have things like uncontrolled pricing, lack of fecal sludge treatment plants. This lack of fecal sludge treatment plants is actually a problem that is still there, because yes, we are advocating for safely managed sanitation services. We have to ensure that the improved pit latrines are emptied the septic tanks are emptied, but now where do we take this fecal sludge that is removed from these facilities? So for the case of Lusaka, under Lusaka Water and Sanitation Company, they do have 2 huge projects that they're actually undertaking at the moment. Then for those that are interested, I'm sure the organizers might actually arrange for a visit to one of the fecal sludge treatment plants that has actually been completed in Lusaka's Chunga or Matero Township. Then there's also another huge one that is being constructed at the old Manchinchi wastewater treatment ponds. Then I also did share with you that if you look at where we're coming from, the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals. Millennium Development Goals in terms of sanitation, they just advocated for availability of a sanitation facility. Now, if you look at the SDG 6.2, it talks of safely managed sanitation. So we're not just looking at availability of a sanitation facility. We're looking at the service that such a sanitation facility is actually supposed to be what? To be enjoyed. So meaning that whatever fecal sludge accumulates in the base has to be emptied. So if you look at the SDGs and SDG on sanitation, you'd find that the SDG on sanitation 6.2 is actually even more demanding compared to the MDG. And if you look at the MDG where we're coming from, Zambia as a country, we did fail to actually attain what? This MDG on sanitation. Then coming to citywide inclusive sanitation, of course, we do know very well that citywide inclusive sanitation is an urban on-site sanitation approach that has been recognized by many scholars, many countries to actually help attain what? SDG 6.2. So citywide inclusive sanitation is not the only strategy that is supposed to be used or to be fostered to ensure that, you know, there's inclusivity in the provision of urban on-site sanitation. There could be other strategies out there, but for now, the one which has dominated the world circles is called citywide inclusive sanitation. And as the National Water Supply and Sanitation Council, in trying to, you know, move along with time and with the world, there are quite a number of strategies that NWASCO, working together with its parent ministry, that's the Ministry of Water Development and Sanitation, including many cooperating partners out there. We sat down over a very long period of time, from 2017 to date, we've still been sitting. In the morning, I failed to come and make this presentation because there's another meeting that is actually taking place at Radisson Blue Hotel, where we're trying to finalize the legal draft statutory instrument for the implementation or enforcement of urban on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management. So the journey has not yet ended, but we're still on course. At least we need to ensure that we get to you know, providing this citywide inclusive sanitation. So one of the issues that had been there, like I earlier stated, that if you look at service provision, these utility companies were skewed towards water supply and sewerage services. Now, because of the advent of citywide inclusive sanitation, NWASCO decided to change operating licenses for the commercial utility companies to also include what? Urban on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management. Because when you look at citywide inclusive sanitation, we're not just limiting sanitation service provision to the sewer. It's supposed to be something which is inclusive, meaning that whatever is being done for the off-site systems has to be done for the what? On-site systems. Investments have to balance between what is being invested for the sewer networks as well as what is being invested in the urban on-site sanitation systems. So that's the advent of what? Citywide inclusive sanitation. And when you look at the rationale of citywide inclusive sanitation, what we're interested in under this phenomenon is that human waste has to be what? Safely emptied, managed along the entire sanitation service chain. So even the statutory instrument that is being developed, including the Lusaka City bylaw on urban on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management, it's going to cover the entire sanitation service chain from containment up to end use, disposal, or reuse. So whatever we are trying to do as NWASCO together with the ministry as well as cooperating partners in terms of sanitation service provision is actually sitting with CWISE. Then these are just principles of CWISE. If you have time, you can just Google them. You find them on the internet. But we do have 7 principles in total, and each principle actually does have sub indicators attached to them. As a country, or Zambia in particular, and National Water Supply and Sanitation Council, there are some indicators that we have picked from 1 or 2 principles that will start reporting on starting next year, which is 2023 when we're reporting for 2022. So that report is going to be available at the end of April next year. Then these are just factors, of course, that affect implementation of citywide inclusive sanitation. We do have things like, poorly built on-site sanitation systems, meaning that these are sanitation systems that probably are not lined, meaning that it becomes very difficult for any kind of fecal sludge management services to be done, wrong building materials being used and all sorts of things. Then there's also an increase in the population, city population, because of the rural-urban migration. Then biasness towards infrastructure planning. You'd find that most of the investments in the recent past, 5-10 years ago, were skewed towards investing infrastructure for what? SWAD sanitation systems. But this time around, what we're saying is that, okay, there's a lot that has been done with regard to SWAD services. We have to look at urban on-site sanitation systems, because that's where the majority of actually the population actually lives. Then in terms of the development process, of course, this was a comprehensive development process with regard to the development of the regulatory frameworks for urban on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management that were actually launched in December 2018. And from the time that they were launched, I'm sure you have realized to say that our utility companies are no longer called water supply and sewerage companies. They are now called water supply and sanitation companies, meaning that they're supposed to embrace urban on-site sanitation and the fecal sludge management services. Then there are other regulatory tools that NWASCO has actually gone ahead to develop, issues to do with the minimum service levels for implementation of urban on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management. Those have been developed. Then we do have the permitting requirements for commercial utility companies like Lusaka Water Supply and Sanitation Company, if at all they want to continue working with the private operators who have been providing this service for a very long time, before even the start of regulation. There are certain regulations that NWASCO has actually developed that are supposed to be abided to by the two entities, if at all they want to enter into some kind of a management contract to do, urban sanitation and fecal sludge management services. Then we also do have, this is currently under development of a code of practice for urban on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management. What was just missing on this guy were the drawings, public sanitation facilities drawing for the same, but now these things have been actually been incorporated in the draft code of practice, and very soon it's going to go out for public comments. Then I was talking about the statutory instrument for urban on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management. We do have quite a number of people here actually that did participate in the development of the technical draft, as well as the legal draft that was actually done by NWASCO. So at the moment, there's a small technical working group that is actually reviewing the work that was done by the legal drafter, as well as the technical draft that was done by most people that are actually in here. Then with regards to the implementation, how are the utilities going to work with various partners in implementing urban on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management in the country? There's a new regulatory framework that it's not really new because it was launched in 2018. This is 2022. So we're no longer calling it new. This is something that, we started implementing in the year 2020. So in terms of roles and responsibilities, we do have our parent ministry where NWASCO sits that, they're going to continue being the overall sector policy in terms of guidance, resource mobilization, and coordination of the water sector. Then NWASCO, where I come from, will continue issuing licenses to commercial utilities for water supply and sanitation. Then permits use to work with other providers under their licenses. So this mandate for water supply and sanitation is not just going to be limited to public utilities like Lusaka Water, Chambesha, and the like. We need to have a lot of public-private participation in the same. So NWASCO has developed what we're calling the permitting requirements and conditions for utilities to engage third-party operators in what? Urban on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management. Then the local authorities, they'll continue to issue bylaws for water supply and sanitation service provision. Very soon, I think the Lusaka City Council will be actually passing a bylaw on the same. And the same bylaw is the same document we're using as a working document for the development of the what? The statutory instrument. So there's a lot of input that actually went in the development of the Lusaka City bylaw. And actually we're finding it very easy for us to come up with the statutory instrument. Then these are just roles and responsibilities that are here. ZEMA, of course, they're interested in the environment. Then the Water Resources Management Authority, which is WAMA, continues to issue permits for abstraction of water to utility companies as well as private players out there. Then the commercial utilities, of course, we're saying that this time around, they're not just going to be limited to water supply and sewerage, but they should also incorporate what? Urban on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management services. Then with the Zambia Bureau of Standards, development of standards for the sanitation service chain. So this is just a pictorial view of whatever it is that I was talking about, that at the apex or the helm, we have the ministry, the parent ministry, where NWASCO sits, and NWASCO is responsible for regulation of water supply and sanitation companies. It regulates all the 11 commercial utilities. Then in terms of service provision, the commercial utilities can choose either to continue offering that service on their own, or they can partner with private operators that have actually been, discharging this mandate even before the start of regulation. So all these documents, this is a document, it's called Regulation of Urban On-Site Sanitation and Fecal Sludge Management. It's available on the NWASCO site. It's a big, not really big, but a bit big. You can download and you can read on your own so that at least you can be more enlightened. Then in terms of updates and future outlook, then Citywide planning and service provision guidelines are being developed by NWASCO. So NWASCO has developed citywide inclusive sanitation guidelines for the commercial utilities. And these guidelines are going to be launched during the upcoming sanitation summit. If you look at the program that has been shared already, you'll find that NWASCO has a presentation on the same. So look out for the Citywide planning and service provision guidelines. Then I did talk about the code of practice for urban on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management. This is also almost finalized and it will go for public comments very soon. Finalization of the SI, this is something that I talked about. Development of permitting requirements for commercial utilities to partner with private entities in service provision. This has already been actually launched. Then what we're saying is that for utilities to completely embrace urban on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management, we're encouraging them to do what? To continue mapping these facilities for, these on-site facilities, because at the moment, most utilities, they do not have this data with regards to the facilities, the states they are in, and all sorts of things. So we're encouraging, the utilities to continue mapping for urban on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management. Then for effective urban OSS and FSM service delivery, of course, we are saying regulation is actually key. We have to continue pushing the utilities to ensure that they embrace what? This new mandate that has been extended to them. Then in terms of conclusion, I think these are things that are speaking to the future outlook that I did share with you, that they have to continue mapping these facilities so that at least when they have the data, the inventory of whatever existing OSS facilities are dominant in their areas of jurisdiction, then they'll be able to produce business and service delivery models. Then we need to have continued synergies between the public, the private, and our cooperating partners that have been supporting utilities, NWASCO, and any other private entities in the provision of urban on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management services. So I'm hoping I was within time. Thank you so much.